Everyone will heal from an experience in his or her own way. I am definitely not one to speed up that experience. But what I do know is that we were not meant to live in the past. Life continues to move. As my mom said, time will continue to move. It's up to you if you want to move with it. I was talking to my son about his experience that he had with public school. And I even shared with my husband, I see that they're talking less and less about that experience. It was a complete culture shock for them. They were not, they were used to people saying not used to, they had heard people saying words. Someone who called them, my son, one time in first grade, a knicker, Nicker. And, they heard things, people say, I hate you, things like that. But to really go to a school environment where you're seeing a lot of violence, it got to a point, my son, he felt like the violence was rising in the school. And almost every other day or so, someone would be in a fight. And kept hearing foul language and inappropriate talk and things that people were saying about their bodies. And it was heart-wrenching 2.5 months of my life. I knew probably the first day when my son came home that school wasn't going to work. And the second day when I heard the principal yelling at parents, yelled at a female that was coming to pick up a kid, but was kind to the male that got out of the car. When I saw her screaming, yelling, and wasn't sure what she was yelling at, and it was a kid across the street, granted, was going to cross the street, and it was a bit busy. It was an intersection that had, traffic, four-way intersection. But she was yelling all the way over to the child and continued to yell at him all the way back. And my son told me that mom, that's people know that's how she was. And I remember the day when I actually asked the teacher, asked the person. I didn't even realize she was the principal. I had met her previous night, and she was looking differently, different hairstyle, I think, or something. And I was just so focused on my son, and and he came out, and I said, can I ask you a question? And she was just kind of walking to and fro. I kind of got that. She was like stumping to and fro, like watching, to see if somebody was doing something, I guess, that they shouldn't be doing. And I kid you not, I thought about the Bible verse, walking to and fro. And I asked her a question, and she said, yeah, I'm just trying to. When I asked her, it was almost like she was saying she had an attitude. And I said, hold up, wait a minute. I asked if I could ask you a question, and I could literally see her shaking. She shook as I talked to her. Because I said, I asked you a question, and I saw the girls on the side of me that was observing the conversation between me and her. God wanted me to see she just shook as if something, was in her. And after that, we got what we needed. And she was like a totally different person. Did you get everything that you needed? And I said, uh-huh. And even after that, my son still continued to go to that school, and it did not seem like it was getting better. We had a conversation with the teachers, parent-teacher conference, and it was shortly after that, it was just, my husband was just like, hey, if you can find a school that's similar to what they've been in, Connections Academy, Willamette, very positive, praising, interweaved virtues, kindness throughout the studies. And if you could find that affordable, then let's do it. Because prior, I had found only schools that were like $2,000 a month. And some way happened where I think I came across the Celis Academy, and I said, I think I have a folder of them. And lo and behold, I searched on my computer, on my files, and it came up. And I think I was kind of leery because it wasn't quite what we had been through. They weren't going to have live lessons. They had different packages, but they had a scholarship, $200 off. And, I was still skeptical. So that day I got on the phone, I called, got the information I needed, and I made the decision. I paid for the class. My kids were able to afford it because they had a job for my mother. My mother actually employed them to do work for her in the summer. So they were like enjoying their summer, buying food, doing all this kind of stuff. Cam getting Japanese food at the mall and everything, buying groceries, toys, whatever they wanted. And it came time for school where they said, Mom, we'll pay for our school. We'll pay the $79 for our school. So they literally bought their freedom. I had asked them both when they got home. I had asked Kayla before she left, and I said, I'm going to check with your brother. And I asked him that Monday, and he said, sure. And I purchased it on Tuesday. I emailed the school that this would be their last day. And I even had followed up and saw, was there anything that research, was there anything that was needed? And nothing else. It just seemed like it was so smooth. The person with the sellers answered my questions. They were just like Academy, the customer service, so kind, so considerate, knew where I was coming from. The kids would have to catch up because they were months into the program. They actually enrolled. Their first day of public school was in August 16th, I believe. And I disenrolled them from that November the 29th. They started that Wednesday the 30th. Acellus, and they were like on it. They were like getting into them because I told them they were going to have to catch up. And and one of the things that came across was the opportunity to enroll them into social emotional. And this instructor is amazing. The way she speaks and addressing just different aspects of emotional well-being, and using things in a positive manner, just so much. And he would get questions. They would get questions on how to approach situations. And I just thought it was a blessing in disguise to actually have that program available, that class available, from coming from a school that they experienced so much. I mean, it got to a point that both my son and my daughter were crying because they did not want to go to school. And I knew that it wasn't it. And it got to a point, you guys, that I felt like in the beginning when I would bring up this information, that even in one email, it was like, I'm sorry that Cam is going through that. We can have him to see a counselor. It was almost as if Cam was the problem, was the issue. And as I would tell my nursing students, that you're going to come into something and you're going to see things that are not right. And that's a good thing. And you want to speak about it. You want to speak up. And there were things that happened. I mean, during that time, a high school student had passed, and my son heard like little remarks about his passing and joking from the students about that. And I was just like, our son was not going to be a statistic. And anytime there was an issue, we addressed it. It got to a point that one of the issues was never responded to, a major issue. That was never responded to. And I think that was it. That was like one of the major things that said, you know what, this is exhausting. This is tiring. This is not necessary. We deserve better. And just recently, over the months, over the years, because that was in 2023 and we're in 2025. Occasionally my son was more consistent in opening up and sharing, Mom, I forgot to tell you this, Mom, when this happened, this. And he was just kind of talking his way through it. I would encourage them to talk, and I always have since they were little. They would always in the car tell me what happened. If I needed to go back in the school, I would, because I believe that you have to nip, like my mom said, you have to nip things in the bud. If you continue to let things happen, you are enabling it to happen. You are saying silently that it is okay. And I know from my own experience that sometimes silence can be fear. Sometimes silence could be that you're not sure how people are going to respond. But I knew from my own experience, because of me remaining silent and things continue to go down a negative path, I needed to speak up. I needed to advocate for my children. I needed to be that voice that they weren't even sure how to articulate. And I'll think, many incidences come to mind, not anger attached to them or fear or resentment, but in a lesson that in my experience, in my tests, in my sons and my daughters, of really making your voice heard, making sure that people understand that you deserve better, knowing your standards and holding firm to those standards, which are essential to healing from the inside out, and realizing that you don't deserve disrespect, or you don't deserve behavior that disrespects you. And my son recently said it not too long ago. He said, Mom, I deserve better. He was making these that comment was in reference to what he had gone through. And slowly but surely they have talked less about the incident. And I see that as part of healing, of being able to know that your voice matters, being able to understand that other people are listening to you, that you're not just speaking just to speak, that people are literally listening to you, and you feel important. You feel like, that's true. I have value. And I would tell my nursing students, and when I would teach, that people often want just to understand that they have value. And so I told my husband recently, they're talking less about it. I believe they have really worked themselves through it. And it almost seemed like every experience my children have had to work themselves through that experience. We have to work ourselves through that healing of really daily just assessing our mind, assessing the inner parts of our being, and say, what do I need to get rid of? What do I need to talk about? What do I need to write about? What can I do in a healthy way to help me release some of this? And I think it's so important, as a parent, as a caregiver, as a spiritual guardian, we are here to help guide our children, not to tell them who they are, but to guide them and to help them to unfold into this being that they are. I believe that we're here with genetic blueprints of our human, that God sees all these different qualities that he wants to express himself through. So we have this unique makeup, whether it be a businessman and that was good with real estate, and maybe part of your great grandmother that was firm in her beliefs. You have this, just this molding that occurs of genetic qualities. And then we also have the spiritual qualities of God, of our virtues, of the truths that are in our heart, to help reflect this truth, right? With a different, unique perspective, and reflecting the truth. That's why everybody's different. That's why there's no competition. That's why everybody has purpose here on earth, no matter how long they've been here. Everybody is an example. Everyone, I believe when Florence Scovel Shinn, she wrote that everybody is your teacher. And I think they attribute that saying to her. But I think in her book, when I was reading, she had said it was unknown or some sort. But everyone is your teacher. And I was just discussing with Bible devotion. We try to have the importance of really sitting down and talking with your children is important, and also having the opportunity for them to share their message, share their thoughts, and that's what it's about. It's not just about reading the Bible, but it's talking about issues, experiences. It's sharing, talking about, I've been talking to my children about virtues. We have a virtue a week. This week is discernment. My mother's principle this week is nip things in the bud. What I mentioned, don't wait to deal with something. And often we have a lot of children that were children that are now adult children that have not nipped things in the bud, that they're still living in the past, right? Because it can be so just painful, not only when you see your children going through it, but when you're going through it yourself, right? And so what this message today is about, that you deserve better. My son said that. He said, "Mom, I deserve better." And I brought it to him, and because he got angry about something, I said, even anger, guilt, shame, anxiety, fear, resentment, bitterness, confusion, self-doubt, vengeance are all time wasters. Time wasters. That it's 1 minute to feel anger, because I believe it's important for us to face our emotions. And I thank my father, who was not there physically in my life, but showed me that I need to face my emotions. I don't need to hide from them. I don't need to use external comforters, but I need to face what's happening. And I've been teaching, sharing, reminding my children that the importance of facing your emotions, facing those feelings, but you don't have to live with them, because they can be such life drainers. They can be such time wasters, that you are not seeing the treasures. You're not grasping, embodying, nourishing those treasures that come from that. What are you supposed to learn from this? What are you supposed to get from this? When we see something in another person, we don't judge that person. We have compassion. We're thankful because they have shown us something that we don't want to have. And therefore, you ask yourself, do I have that in me? Neville Goddard reminded me of that. I was reading his book, and he said, those that you see in others, your wakefulness is something that you have in yourself. I know people say, wait a minute, I don't have child molestation. I don't have bullying. I don't have foul language in my, but is there some other key principle? Is there manipulation? Is there anger? Is there resentment? Is there bitterness? Because even those emotions can have you doing things that you would not necessarily do. Nothing happens overnight. And you'd be amazed of how those emotions can really turn your character, turn your voice, turn your behavior around, that you're doing stuff. What do you hear on the news? That is unbecoming of him. He was a nice boy. And then they do something, you're like totally shocked. But what emotions, what thoughts, what underlying beliefs, what pain was being nourished inside of him, that it totally gave him a different way of looking at life, a different identity, one unlike his own. So when we look at healing from the inside out, it's important to realize those time wasters, that because we are fearful doesn't mean we need to continue to live in fear or be afraid. That we are greater than our experiences. Every experience builds on the next one. There is something we're supposed to learn. And it's not to learn how to hurt one another, but how to love one another, how to have compassion, to embrace that compassion inside of you, to really show that you are beyond I am beyond what you did to me, that I deserve better. I deserve love. I deserve freedom in all areas of my life, freedom from fear, freedom from anxiety, from bitterness, from anger, guilt, shame. I deserve to be financially free. I deserve to enjoy the fruits of my labor and not have to struggle with my weight, not have to struggle with unhealed wounds, behavior that dominates other people, thoughts. That I deserve to have that life, that we are here to serve one another with our gifts and not with our pain. So I want you to look at today and ask yourself, what has been a time waster for me? What is blinding me from seeing this life that God says in Jeremiah, the Bible says in Jeremiah 29:11, for I know the plans I have of you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you, not to harm you, but to give you hope in a future. If you believe in Jesus and what he said that he came here so we may have an abundant life. And even if you don't believe in the Bible, ask yourself, what do I really believe in? Is it about the Bible and who wrote it? Or is it about things that can help you become the highest version of yourself? This is Tamika Chambers with Create a Generational Love Cycle. When we dismantle the thoughts that created the cycle of pain in the first place and change it for thoughts of love, because that is the Great Commission, that we love each other as you love one another, as you love yourself. And it's hard to love others if you don't love yourself. But when you heal from the inside out, when you take all of that garbage, all of those time wasters, all of those life draining weeds out of you, what is left is love. That's always been there. I'll talk to you soon. I'll put my newsletter. I haven't really gotten back into that, but if you want to sign up, I'll put that link in there. And otherwise, make this lifetime great, because you still can.